a veteran? What does being a veteran mean to you?
Thanks, Kimberly. I see a veteran as somebody who voluntarily wrote a signed blank check to the United States government up to and including their life in the service of the citizens and the Constitution of our great nation. I mean, it is truly, a selfless service that veterans do. And, again, it's that blank check. I'm willing to lay my life down on the ground for you.
Hello, and welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly McNabb, and I am joined by my husband, Major Barrett McNabb. In our 14th episode, right before Veterans Day 2023, we will focus this segment on asking the question, what is a veteran? Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations defines a veteran as a person who served in the active military, naval, or air service, and who was discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. But Barrett, what's the deal about with or without the apostrophe in Veterans Day?
Yeah, so Veterans Day is a day that honors all veterans. It is not a possessive, so it's not the Veterans Day. It's everybody's day. It's just to honor veterans. And to get back to your point, Memorial Day is honoring the people who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service of the nation and have died while in military service. Veterans Day, again, as you alluded to, is somebody that has not been dishonorably discharged from any of the services. Typically, you're looking at an honorable or a general discharge. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's Veterans Day, no apostrophe.
Okay. Now, we started this podcast. Why? Because I have been begging you for a very long time to write a book about not just war stories, all of your stories. Because when we're at gatherings, people drop everything they're doing and to come listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're right. We've been making podcasts with my military stories mixed in with the current news. But, if you really want to support veteran content creators, please hit that subscribe and like button. As a small beginning channel, it would really, really help us out, and we'd be very much appreciative. But, yeah, you're right on the military stories and the other stories that I have, working with various alphabet agencies throughout our government. It's fun telling the stories. I mean, I usually don't tell them unless I'm asked, but still, you're absolutely right. Eventually, I am going to write that book, but being able to share this with you in this podcast format has been pretty fun and pretty exhilarating. So it's just it's been a wild ride with you so far, and we've been doing this just over 3 months now. So we're still new at this, and we're still learning, but we're so glad that you're along with us on the ride.
So Barrett, some people may ask, why on earth did you join the United States Army? Yeah,
well, so we asked this question in episode 1 of Azimuth Podcast, but I'll go ahead and our audience has definitely grown since then, and it was totally by accident. When I graduated high school and went for freshman orientation to Sam Houston State University, we had our classes in a newspaper, and you'd go and you'd register. The seniors got to go first, then the juniors and the sophomores, and then the freshmen got with the classes that were left over. And so I went and looked, and I saw this really cool business class that I thought would be a great thing to do to get kind of under my belt. It was leadership and management techniques, and I showed up to the first day of class, and the professor walked in with a high and tight flat top, wearing a camouflage uniform. And I looked around, I was like, what's going on here? And I was not the only one that had made that mistake, because there were a number of people that were looking around as well. And it was Welcome to Leadership and Management Techniques, Military Science 101, ROTC. And I'll remember this. The first day of class, we learned how to shake hands. And it was web-to-web contact, eye-to-eye contact. You're the most important person in the room at this point in time. Shake a woman's hand just as strong as you shake a man's hand. And that's carried with me ever since the first day of class of ROTC. But it was just an amazing ride. As the class went on a couple weeks, the guy in front of me had a camouflage uniform, and I said, "Hey man, where'd you get that?" And he said, "Well, I joined an organization called Ranger Company, and we practice small infantry tactics on Thursdays. You got to come check it out." So I did. And, they had camoed up and had camouflage uniforms on, BDUs, the battle dress uniform. And, they were reacting to near ambush. They were crossing linear danger areas, and it was really cool. So I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." And they said, "Okay, well, here's a rucksack." And I said, "Well, this is pretty heavy." And they said, "You'll get used to it." And so it was, it was just kind of there. And I excelled. I had the opportunity to go to airborne school, to become a United States Army paratrooper, and also go to air assault school out in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, to learn the art of how to do helicopter infantry. And so I did those back to back as a cadet, which was fairly unusual at the time. And then I just kept liking what I was doing. I contracted and I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the infantry, and the rest was history after that.
Now, that sticks as pretty memorable. What would be like your most memorable moment in the military?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kimberly. I mean, I'll tell you the initial invasion in Iraq, and I was in a heavy weapons company in the 82nd Airborne Division, and heavy weapons company is Humvees, and they have tow missile launchers on them, as well as 50 caliber machine guns and Mark 19 automatic grenade launchers that shoot ping pong sized grenades at about 400 rounds a minute, and it is exactly as cool as it sounds. I mean, it truly is. So these vehicles have ITAS tow missile launchers, and they fire the TOW-2 Bravo, which is a really cool missile. And the 75th Ranger Regiment wanted to have a company, a heavy weapons company that was ITAS equipped, that was airborne qualified. Well, as you start ticking off the requirements that they needed, there was only really one unit that accomplished all that, and it was a Delta Company, 2nd Battalion, 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment, and I happened to be the executive officer of that, so second in command of that heavy weapons company. And so it was, just an amazing experience. And it was the first deployment of HIMARS. Now, HIMARS is making all of the news now with all of the stuff that's going on with Ukraine and all the success that HIMARS, but the Army hadn't purchased it yet. Lockheed Martin was making them, and the Army was testing them. The Army said, "We have got a great test that we'd love to have these HIMARS do, and it's going to be high-intensity conflict in Iraq during the initial invasion." And Lockheed Martin said, okay. And so the 75th Ranger Regiment, specifically the 3rd Ranger Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment, formed a task force called Task Force Hunter. And all the stuff I'm about to tell you, it's on the internet. There's books that are written about it. So none of this is classified. It's all been declassified. So nobody leave angry comments that I'm telling classified information. This is all now open source. But they wanted to do these HIMARS and have them infiltrate behind Iraqi lines, so to support the 3rd Infantry Division mechanized on their movement from Kuwait into Baghdad. And so we'd actually practiced this unbeknownst to us, but we had gone to the National Training Center, and we had done a full exercise of jumping in as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne, and then having 3rd ID do a passage of lines through the Whale Gap. Those of my NTC brethren and sisters out there, you know what I'm talking about. But still, it was it was just, this first operational test. So we were Task Force Hunter, assigned to 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, and we were practicing, what we were going to do with the HIMARS, how we were going to fire and then move and set up the defensive positions and things like that. So it was the battalion had deployed, and the brigade had deployed as well. The other 2 battalions had deployed to Kuwait, and 2nd Battalion had deployed to RR Saudi Arabia, and I was the last plane out. And the significance of being the last plane out was President Bush had not made his decision yet on whether or not he was going to attack Iraq or invade Iraq. And the launching of my plane as the last tail element of Task Force Hunter the decision had been made. And so we got a telephone. The 82nd Airborne is a rapid deployment force. They have battalions that are on 2-hour, 4-hour, and 6-hour recall. And then they have different training cycles that they're going through. And our battalion was obviously, since it was moving to the position to invade Iraq, we're on 2-hour recall. And the code word for this is Green Corvette. And so I remember it was like 2 o'clock in the morning and my cell phone rang, and I'm laying in bed, and the charge of quarters, the CQ desk, said, Lieutenant McNabb, this is Sergeant Smith, Green Corvette. Do you understand? Can you please repeat back? And I say, yes, I understand, Green Corvette. And that means it's go time. And so I had a buddy of mine who was married, that his wife drove, another second lieutenant drove us to the battalion and dropped us off, and she kept the car. So they were downstairs and they were waiting for me. I had my my ruck and my A bag and B bag, and I remember distinctly going back to my bedroom and laying down on my bed. And I just the lights were off, just kind of looked at the ceiling a little bit and just laid down on my bed, and because this is my first combat deployment. And so, it was just kind of the surreal moment. So I took maybe 15 seconds or so, and I got up. And when I went to combat, we wore civilian clothes to Black Ramp, which is on Pope Air Force Base, and we boarded a C-5 Galaxy. So we had civilian clothes on and our LCEs, or load carrying equipment, on that hold our magazines and canteens and stuff like that. And our story was that, in case anybody was observing what we were doing, is we were going to be civilians on the battlefield for the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana at Fort Polk. And so if anybody took pictures like, hey, where are these guys going at 2 o'clock in the morning? We're civilians on the battlefield for a rotation at the JROTC. And then once we got on the C-5 Galaxy and took off, we changed into our BDUs, and actually it was the tan colored ones, and so the desert uniforms, DCUs. And so we left, and we landed in RR Saudi Arabia, and I'll put a graphic up that shows kind of the order of battle for the initial invasion. But we landed in RR Saudi Arabia with all of the Joint Special Operations Command units, all of the Task Force Blue, the Navy SEALs, Task Force Orange, Task Force Green, the Special Forces, Task Force Red, the Ranger Regiment. And one of the coolest things that I ever saw was we were loading up our vehicles with ammo. And, that doesn't sound like a big deal, except there were these pallets, and it was like a giant Home Depot with these pallets, and there was all kinds of different ammo in it. And, I've always, hey, we're going to the range, here's 2,000 rounds of 50 cal, here's 20,000 rounds of 5.56 to distribute out and fire for the range and stuff like that. But I've never been through, like, how many AT4s do you want? I'll take 20. Okay, here's 20 AT4s. How many LAWs, light anti-tank weapons, do you want? I don't know. 30? How about 40? Okay, I'll take 40. How many Claymores do you want? Claymore anti-personnel mines. I don't know. I've never really. How about 3 per truck? How many hand grenades do you want? let's go with 5 per person, and some in the supply truck. Okay, sounds good. And it was like this candy land of war, of being able to grab all of this ammunition and stuff that I've never seen this before,
So
and
many
I've never
NRA
seen it again.
people are loving this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, literally, it was like a kid in a candy store. I'd never seen this before. I've never seen it again. And so it just absolutely amazing to just have all of this ammo, and it was just like, what do you want? And there was no limit. And so anyway, we were led to the border by the CIA, and these guys did not look like Pierce Brosnan at all. They looked like old, fat white guys. And so James Bond, they were not, but they led us to the border, and they were in Land Rovers. And so we were blackout driving with our night vision goggles in the Humvees and the 5 platoons of the Heavy Weapons Company, and then all of the Ranger Regiment vehicles, the Gun-Vs, and then the HIMARS rocket launchers. And we were firing the ATACMS Block 2 Alphas, which are the ones that go really, really far. And so it was just kind of interesting to get led. They were driving white light, and they paid off the Saudi customs officials to look that way for about an hour. We were delayed because there were a bunch of Tomahawk cruise missiles that were launched from the Red Sea and striking targets all throughout Iraq. And we had an F-16 come in and blow the ever-living heck out of the customs facility on the Iraqi side. And there were all of these visual observation posts that we were concerned about, these VisObs, and they were layered in lines of defense, and we had plans to destroy all of them. We had this it was a lot of firsts. It was a lot of firsts. We had this aircraft IFF, identification friend or foe, that normally goes on an aircraft, and they shoved it into the back of a Humvee. And so it was a couple of Air Force guys, maybe 3 Air Force guys, or maybe they were Navy. I think they were Navy. And they were in there all huddled in, and their job was to make our unit look like a friendly aircraft from the ground. And so that coalition aircraft wouldn't drop bombs on us and stuff like that, because we were operating, we had infiltrated into Iraq, and we were operating forward of all of the 3rd ID forces. And we were firing our HIMARS rockets deep in Iraq towards the frontline trace of 3rd ID in order to soften up enemy forces. And so this Bug E was kind of this hodgepodge identification friend or foe IFF that was shoved in this Humvee. And we had different keypads. The terrain was a keypad, and they would turn off keypads so that it was a safe zone for us, and then it was a free fire zone all around us. And as we moved from keypad to keypad, they would turn on and off the ability to fire. One of the times we fired HIMARS, and it was at nighttime, and there was an F-15 that was flying back from a bombing mission, and it was just flying, and all of a sudden he sees what to him looks like an intercontinental ballistic missile firing off from the desert. It was one of our HIMARS, and just this darkness of night, and having this finger of God going, from the desert floor up, and he turned on his afterburners and hit his flares, and we were, looking at the buggy like, please tell him not to fire on us. But it was just one of those things that you'll just always remember. We got another mission during this period of time. Some little birds with Delta Force operators were operating in Western Iraq, and the 160th was flying these little birds, and these guys and gals are the cream of the crop as it comes to rotary wing aviation. And so anyway, they're flying with night vision goggles and all of their little blinking lights off and stuff like that. And I think there was 5 of them, and they were flying a trail formations, just one right after another, and they couldn't see. The moon had gone down, and they just literally could not see because the instrumentation inside the helicopter was washing out their night vision goggles. And so it was so dark, even with that little bit, it was making it so they couldn't fly. So what they all decided, because these guys are really high speed, they decided to all fly sideways. And so they're all just looking out their window, flying sideways in the helicopters. And finally, they're like, all right, this can't be safe, because the instruments were washing out their night vision. So by looking out the side of the helicopter, they didn't have any instruments there. They were just flying sideways, and they finally landed, and we secured them until the moon rose and they could get back up. But yeah, we got reattached back to the 82nd Airborne. And we fought in Al Samawa, Diwania, Ramadi, Fallujah, Baghdad, and it was just absolutely amazing, and it was just surreal. And so obviously we were deployed for a year. There's a lot more stories that go into this, but here's the really surreal point is I got back to my apartment, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, outside of Fort Bragg.
This is before we were married.
Before we were married. So I just, I was gone for a year, and I walk into my apartment, and it's just weird to be home. There's some dust that was everything, but everything was right where I left it. And the most surreal thing is when I walked into my bedroom, my body print was still in the comforter, as if I had never left. And that was just one of the most memorable things is going back and hearing the green Corvette, lying down, and then a year later coming, and that body print was still in the comforter.
Sounds like from a movie.
Yeah, it's absolutely, from a movie.
Okay. With all of your experiences, what would you say was the most challenging thing you've done?
Well, so it's interesting. You have to define a baseline. And once you have found what your baseline is, you'll be able to reference that back and forth, whether something was easier or harder than your baseline. And I'd say my baseline was in the infantry officer basic course after I showed up to Fort Benning to learn how to be an infantry officer specifically. And so all infantry officers have to go there and go through this infantry officer basic course. And we were doing platoon operations, and it was I want to say it was in January, and there was a winter freeze warning that had occurred. And this is in this would have been 2000 now, but so January 2000. And this freeze warning was coming in the area of Fort Benning and Columbus, Georgia, and the post shut down. But we didn't know this. We were, in the field doing great, wonderful things for the United States, and all of a sudden, the instructors all were huddled up, and they had chow out for us. They had a chow line, and they're yelling at us for no reason, but they yelled at us for no reason often, the NCOs that were running the training. And so they lined up chow, and they said, put everything on your plate. So you got your vegetables, your protein, your bread, whatever. And they said, take one bite and throw it away. And so we took one bite and threw everything away. And they did that to kind of check the block to say, yes, we fed them. And so we got one bite of the food. Everything else was wasted. And what had happened is the post had shut down. And all bus services had ceased, so nobody was allowed on or off Fort Benning because the commanding general had shut the post down. And so we had to walk back. It was beginning to get really, really cold. I mean, ice was forming and things like that. We knew, it was cold anyway, but it was starting to really get cold. And they made us strip down naked. Nothing, jaybirds, a lot of shrinkage going on. And so they wanted to make sure that nobody had any polypropylene tops and bottoms on and things like that, because we were going to have to do a forced road march back to the barracks, and they didn't want somebody to pass out from being a heat injury, so they wanted to verify that nobody had on any long underwear or polypropylene, people call polypro.
because you get sweaty and then
you
it
get sweaty
freezes,
and then you get hot and you overheat, and you can actually become a heat injury even though it is cold outside. And so we put our BDUs back on and our boots, and we started heading back to the barracks. And it was about a 20-mile foot march to get back, because we had bussed out there, and the plan was to bus us back, but this freak winter storm came down and closed the post down, and it was miserable, absolutely miserable. Took us, I want to say it was 4 or 5 hours to march back. And we're inside the barracks area where the infantry officer basic course is, and we were waiting on all of the platoons to finish in the company. And I think there was 4 platoons. It was a training company, so it was 4 platoons. And so we were just sitting there, just shivering, all hot and sweaty. And now it's dipping into the teens, and we're just absolutely hot and sweaty from doing this movement, and we're just sitting there, just literally, just like a vibrator, just shaking. And so we're waiting to get our weapons turned in and wiped down and cleaned down and stuff, and ice was forming on our LCEs, load carrying equipment, our Alice packs, our rucksacks, and it was absolutely just miserable. And so I got back to the barracks, and I just kind of sat down. I didn't even take my ruck off. I just kind of sat down on my bunk, and I couldn't do anything. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. It was just absolutely miserable. And you couldn't feel my hands and feet and things like that. And at that point in time, that was the worst thing that had happened to me. And ever since then, in my entire military career, including combat, including all the difficult things that I did in the Army, I always referenced my baseline of that winter forced foot march with no food. And I said, was it as bad? This is bad. But was it as bad as that one time in the infantry officer basic course? No, it was. Okay, no problem. Was it as bad as the infantry officer basic course, the forced foot march? Yes. Okay, then this is really bad. And so you have to have this baseline, I think, right. and it's throughout life. You have a baseline throughout life, but I always measured it, and that I had worse things happen to me, and harder things, happen to me. I was stationed in Korea, and it got even colder, -40, and I don't know if people can imagine -40.
No, we live in Houston.
Yeah,
and I'm from Georgia. I've never seen negative before.
Yeah.
Ever in my entire life.
Well, -40, interestingly enough, -40, because you have Celsius and Fahrenheit, -40 in Celsius and Fahrenheit is where they intersect. It's the same. So as you're doing Fahrenheit, doing Celsius, it is the point where Celsius and Fahrenheit intersect, and it is cold. And then on the flip side, operating in Baghdad in the summertime, hot and humid in the 120s. So just absolutely extreme. I've kind of crawled all over the earth. But again, I always referenced it back to that infantry officer basic course. Was it as bad as that freezing forced foot march? And that's kind of what I usually base my experiences on.
Well, I think people need more experiences like that. Hearing what some people complain about, you hear these celebrity horror stories,
Sure.
and how they freak out over the wrong type of water, or how dare a fan come ask me for my autograph. I'm like, dude.
There could be worse things.
You're way too much in a bubble. You need to go, as Chris Rock says, go out and get kidnapped, have something bad to happen to you, so you don't complain so much.
Everybody needs their forced foot march in the freezing cold.
Exactly, and that's why some people had a rough childhood, and if they overcome that, they're some of the best people ever, because they know that, hey, things could be worse.
Yeah, that's true. It can always be worse.
Well, Barrett, do you miss being in the Army?
That's a great question. It really is. I mean, I had, let me preface this. So I had a really good buddy of mine, and he was in the 82nd Airborne with me, and he was a West Point graduate, and he left the Army and went to go work for Goldman Sachs, and he worked his way up through Goldman Sachs. He wound up being a vice president at Goldman Sachs, and I would call him, I don't know, once a week or so, just to see what he's doing. And I'd ask him if he missed it. And he told me, I miss it every single day. I miss it every single day. And I honestly, I mean, every once in a while I miss it, but honestly, I don't. And I think the difference is I got to do everything that I wanted to do. And I felt that my tour of duty was done, and I had done a very good job, and it was time to retire. And so I retired, and we retired, because by the time I retired, we were married. And, do I miss it? I don't necessarily enjoy all the pain and all the limping and looking like a 90-year-old man from all the knee and hip and back pain. But when I look back at it, best job I ever had. Best job I ever had.
I think some people miss it because it is hard to transition from like something that's high speed, even though it may suck getting into it and getting used to that rhythm of life. But to go slow, anybody who's, it's a stupid example, but by comparison, but like if you're a retail worker and then you're there for the Christmas and you hate the Christmas rush, but then once it's over, you're like, oh, I'm kind of bored now. Or,
right.
Like if you're a CPA, it can suck having to work every single Saturday, working 70, 80 hours a week.
During tax season, right?
Yeah, tax season. And just going to work, it's dark. Coming back, it's dark. But then afterwards, you're kind of like, okay, I'm kind of bored now. So I think that's kind of what they're
I mean, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people got out. When we got back to Fort Bragg after a year of high intensity conflict and then low intensity conflict, because we beat the Iraqi army, they capitulated, and then they transitioned into guerrilla warfare forces, and it became a low intensity conflict. And so when we got back to Fort Bragg and we're sitting at our desks, we're like, what do we do now? I don't know. And, the adrenaline was gone, and we're just, we got to get back into training plans and things like that. And a lot of my fellow officers, I'd gotten promoted to captain by then, a lot of fellow officers got out, like my friend, just because we didn't know what to do. And so I wound up staying in, but it was still, surreal on, what you're saying, like, hey, it's done. Now what do we do? I mean,
yeah. So now you're civilian life,
right?
And after you retired, we had kids. What has surprised you the most about joining civilian life? Because I've told you some things that may surprise you.
Right. Well, there's definitely there's not a lot of yelling that goes on. There's in the military, there's a lot of yelling for some reason, even for no reason, just hurry up and wait type of things. But one of the things that most surprised me was, and this is not for every civilian. I have met a ton of hardworking civilians, but my first job as a second lieutenant, as a air assault rifle platoon leader in Korea, with 40 men under my command, I was working 140 hours a week, right? So I mean, that's just the way it is, and I've seen people that are complaining now about 9-to-5 jobs, and that's hard, and like 9-to-5 job, that's wow, I'd love that, but still, I was on a corporate training event, and I had someone who worked for me because we're small business owners, and so I had somebody that worked for me, and we went and received a block of instruction, and we received the same block of instruction at the same time in the same location from the same instructor, and the task. She failed the task. She failed to do the task. And I said, look, we learned the same thing at the same time. I'm coming up on 50, and I'm able to grasp all of these new concepts and do all this. And her response, and I couldn't believe this, her response was, I'm only 23 years old. What do you expect out of me? And I said, well, at 23, I was an air assault rifle platoon leader on the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea with 40 men under my command. That's what I expect out of you. And so anyway, she wound up quitting, as you know. But
and we have heard so many horrible, lame excuses for people not wanting to come to work and people not knowing what full-time exempt means. Like, hey,
sure,
if it takes you 60 hours to get the job done, that you get paid the same.
You work
don't
work
get
until
extra
the task.
PTO, you don't get paid bonus.
Yeah,
and I've tried to warn them, like,
it,
people aren't that professional.
in the army, it's task based. It's not time based, and
Yes.
so that's kind of one of the things I took away. A lot of the civilian stuff is time based. It seems in the civilian world.
So what advice would you give someone who may possibly be thinking about joining the military?
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about joining the military and becoming a veteran yourself, do it. Just do it. If we're all talking about this college debt. You can get the post 9/11 GI Bill, get your college paid for. You don't even have to go to college. You could go to trade school. You could go to race car driving school. You could go to culinary school. You could become a airplane pilot, a helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
You can do all those things with your education benefits. You get access to health care if you retire. You get VA benefits, health benefits for service-connected disabilities. You get the VA loan.
Everyone else is paying for their health insurance.
I mean, it's a really great deal. The VA home loan, so you don't have to put a deposit down in order to get a house.
That's how we got our house.
And that's exactly how we got our house. And so there are a ton of benefits. There's a lot of discounts in Home Depot and Lowe's and things like that. Now, I have seen veterans, if there's a business, and this makes me kind of sad and a little angry, if they don't offer a military discount. I've seen veterans kind of give the business grief. Hey, look, don't do that.
You're not entitled to
nobody.
It's up to the business.
Yeah, nobody owes you anything. The only thing that's owed is your compensation through your service-connected disability, your post 9/11 GI Bill or Montgomery GI Bill.
Promised.
Yeah, well, just what you signed up for. So, but still, if they have a discount, I use it. I've got a Lowe's and a Home Depot discount, and it saves a lot of money. But even more than just the benefits of that you get after the service, getting time management skills and leadership skills and all of the task-oriented things that you're going to be able to accomplish at such a young age, the business world is going to love you. And so it's going to set you up for success.
And you can get much more easily government jobs than you can
Sure.
just as a
you do a veteran's
civilian.
benefit.
But also, if you're thinking about it and you're a young person, there are different age limits at which you can join, and after that, you can't join anymore. And so you may be 45 years old looking back going, I kind of wish I had done that. You can't
go back.
Even if they let you, your body's not going to be in the same shape and being able to handle those rucksacks. And, not everybody joins the front lines anyway.
But still, even with all the benefits, do it because you love your country.
Yes. And that pride, that sense of self-accomplishment, I mean, no one can ever take that away from you.
Absolutely. And your country needs you. It really does. So on this Veterans Day, to all past, present, and future guardians of democracy and freedom, happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I'm your host, Barrett McNabb, and with me is my wife, Kimberly McNabb. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about the Trump fraud trial and what an amazing trial this is. There's a whole bunch of firsts, sitting president getting through all of this. But Kimberly, what do you have? What do you see right now?
To me, whether you like him, hate him, whatever, to me this comes across as very biased. It's just a mission to get Trump. I mean, and that seems to be the last, we're going on 7-8 years now. I mean, you have Rashida Tlaib, she barely got the oath of office out of her mouth, and she's like, we're going to impeach that mother effer.
I'd say it wasn't even her oath of office. I'd say that she was
right after.
It was her victory party.
Yes.
After she won, and she just blurts out she's going to get the MFer.
Yes, and even her fellow Democrats were like, whoa, don't upend our plans, man. Keep it subtle.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's very unprofessional.
So before she's
even if you hate him, it's very unprofessional.
Even before she even knows how Congress works, she's already campaigning on the fact that she's going to impeach Trump. On what? I mean, they obviously did impeach Trump, but to go in with a blanket, I'm going to keep searching until I find something to impeach him on. That's searching for a crime.
Yes, and obviously, Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, her whole campaign to become Attorney General was, I'm going to shine a light in every corner of his real estate dealings. Like, that's your campaign?
And that sounds like targeting. I mean, again, it looks like you are trying to find the crime on somebody rather than a crime presenting itself. It's you keep looking until you can find something to charge somebody with. That seems a little, premeditated and vindictive.
Also, shouldn't your run for office of any sort be based on your merit and what you can do for your constituents?
Right.
So already very biased. So even if you want to charge him, it needs to be someone who's not obviously so biased. And just the look on her face during the trial, she is just mean mugging him.
Yeah, let's take a look.
I'm going to get you.
Let's take a look here. So this is her just staring down Trump.
She's not looking at anybody else, doing anything else. That's her whole mission right there.
And then we're about to look at the judge.
It should be based on the crime, not the person that you're in that courtroom.
Absolutely. But we're about to, I hit pause, but we're about to look at the judge.
And this judge, not unbiased either.
I am so excited to be here.
I mean, if you showed up in court for anything and you're the defendant and the judge looks at you or is that excited to be at your trial.
And pose for the camera. Let me make sure that you get my good side and take my glasses off.
I want to go down in history as being the man that got Trump. I mean, yeah, they can throw this out on appeals, but that's time, that's money. And clearly that is their purpose, to haul him up. I mean, even if he's guilty, it still should not be so obviously biased. Yeah,
I mean, what we're seeing, and if you listen to podcasts and you listen to the news, and you listen to Trump, this is just election interference. He's trying to win the Republican presidential nomination so he can go ahead and campaign in the general election. And again, pundits, even Democratic pundits, have kind of done a little wink and nod, and that this is a little bit of a trying to slow him down, kind of hit him in the shins, so it kind of slows him down. But the weird thing is every time he gets indicted with a new indictment, he gains 5 points in the polls, and so sometimes I think you can protest too much. And I think the American public is seeing this like, come on, you're just throwing all of this at him right now.
Methinks thou does protest too much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but we're talking about the fraud trial. So there's lots of legal. There's the government secret documents, classified information documents trial. There's the the January 6th.
Name it. There's
trial.
Probably one out there or coming.
But we're focusing on the fraud trial that's taking place in New York City right now. In fact, as of the taping of this episode, Ivanka Trump is
she's
in the middle of her testimony.
Thought she was going to get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Away unscathed. But anyway, this clearly biased judge, all too happy to be there, or just enjoys his job way too much every day. I don't know.
Sure.
But he issued a pre-trial ruling. How can you have a ruling before the trial? I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah,
I'm a stupid accountant. So someone please explain that to me.
So I mean, being a criminal justice major, having a degree in criminal justice, I can look and apply some of this. So while I'm not an attorney, there are two things that could have happened. One was the rumor that there was a box that needed to be checked, and Trump's attorneys needed to check it in order to have a jury trial versus a bench trial. And a bench trial means you just have the judge. And there was this, I didn't get a chance to see the documents, but supposedly there was a rumor that they had forgotten to check a jury trial, and so they had the bench trial. Now, the other thing that I've heard is that the way that the prosecution filed the charges, this particular trial wasn't eligible for a jury trial, and therefore was only for a bench trial. I don't know which is correct, but doesn't matter. We have a bench trial. We have the judge. And one of the weirdest things that we're seeing is, you're right, this pretrial hearing, and Trump has been found guilty of fraud by the judge, and Trump had not testified, but we do have lots of taped depositions and things like that. But in looking at what some of these valuations are that the judge has done, we're not real estate brokers, but we know how to use the internet, and we've gone on Zillow, right? And we can see that the judge put the valuation on Mar-a-Lago at $18 million. Well, you can go to Zillow yourself, just Zillow.com, and this is not a paid sponsorship or anything, but we are available. But still, we just happen to use that particular one because it's pretty easy to use. But we went and looked, and the houses that surround Mar-a-Lago that have a tenth, or even, there's a house that's directly north, I think it's 3 streets north, it's worth $50 million, and it has a quarter of the property. That not only is the structure that's on this smaller than the club of Mar-a-Lago, or even the guest houses, but the actual front lawn or back lawn or whatever it is, the terrain, that the acreage is quarter of the size, and it's only on the bay side of the island, whereas Mar-a-Lago goes the width of the island, from the bay side all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and there are 24 million. The particular one that we talked about was a quarter of the size, 50 million. So I mean, that's
to claim 18 million, and then he paid 10 million for it in 1985. So 38 years ago, and 38 years only go up $8 million. And I mean, that's yes, it's 80% increase, but still, okay, take our house, for instance. We bought our house in 2016, and 7 houses down the same street, same side of the tracks, and everything, similar square footage, similar
one less
layout,
bathroom.
one less bathroom. It is 67% more expensive than what we paid for our house in just 2016. 7 years.
7 years.
67% in 7 years. You're telling me 38 years, 80%? Way more touristy area, come on.
And Mar-a-Lago is a business, and you did the research on what they made.
So 2014, the compilation report, which we'll touch on in a minute, the compilation report was 2014. In 2014, Mar-a-Lago made $10 million. So they made the same amount of money that the property cost in 1985. And if you sell a business, oftentimes they'll use the earnings to evaluate that business. Now, Barrett, you've interacted with people who've sold their businesses. Can you speak to earnings, what that relates to in selling it, which is the value? And
that you're exactly right. We're small business owners, and I've helped people buy and sell their businesses, and we're in the medical industry for the vast majority of our businesses, and we use something called EBITDA. Right, the earnings before taxes, interest,
depreciation,
and amortization, and so we basically that's a 12-month profit. And then you do a multiple of that 12-month profit. And so the businesses that we're in are going for about a 4.6 multiple. And so you would take your annual, so you in this instance,
if you take $10 million times
4.6,
that's $46 million.
Right.
So,
and that's only in our industry. In his industry,
I mean,
and his
yeah, it depends on the
brand
industry.
probably has a lot
It's
more
more.
valuation to it because of the Trump brand.
Yes, and this is a judge, doing this. This is not an accountant or realtor, and he claimed that he just used the property tax assessor. Well, I know for us, we bought our house 7 years ago, and according to Harris County in Texas, our house has only increased by like 0.25% in value.
Right.
If you go onto Zillow, again, it's Zillow. I mean, it could vary, but they have our house increasing by 21%. So you go from 0.25 to 0.25% to 21%.
Yeah. So obviously there's a little bit of leeway there.
100%. 100 points.
But as far as I know, this judge does not have a real estate license, and just seems to be arbitrarily using the taxes as his basis to find that Trump did inflate his properties. And I mean,
and this is just one of the properties, but this is an example. This one could argue probably based just on this portion that there's some bias here. Anyway,
this makes me sad. It makes me sad that there's this
that
this
you can
obvious
be a good legal
bias.
mind and still be really bad at math, because
Sure.
I can't tell you how many pre-med students I met in college had photographic memories, never had to study. Everyone else was struggling with organic chemistry. They aced it. They didn't have to repeat the class, but horrible at their finances. Went to the same schools that I did and came out with like 20 times more debt. It was ridiculous.
Right.
Because they had to have the latest computers and the new car. And I'm like, you're a college student. You're not supposed to have that stuff yet.
But A.G. Jones, I mean, looking at her big thing is the numbers aren't going to lie, and that's the
But it
smartest
depends
thing.
on what numbers you're going
you
to
look at.
use.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're looking at the ones that are the disadvantage Trump the most as your statement of fact, as your truth, that's not really what the valuation is. That's just what he's paying in property taxes.
And plus, there are different valuation methods, and Trump claimed it was like $328 million. It may not be, but it definitely is not close to 18. I'm pretty confident in that.
Now, what about these gag orders?
Is it gag orders? That's just an excuse to get money out of
the
Trump.
judge said,
"Do you know
Trump
Trump
is mean? Trump has been mean to my clerk, and he can't be mean, and so therefore,
well, also
gag."
that is not a realistic expectation with Donald Trump. You may as well just ask him to fork over, what was it, $15,000 in
Yeah, it was a
fees,
$5,000 fine, and then it went up,
10,000,
then a $10,000 fine.
Yeah. So, and some people are like, oh, is it constitutional with freedom of speech? I mean, sometimes gag orders will be issued to protect, possible witnesses, keep the defendant from interacting with them. So there's precedent for that part,
Sure.
unfortunately. Now, I've heard some podcasters talk about the compilation report, where it lists what Donald Trump puts his valuation of.
And what's
of
a compilation
the
report?
So, some podcasters are like, oh, well, he just used this compilation report from accountant. You could trust it. Well, here's the thing. Accountants can, besides financial statements, they can issue 3 different types of reports based on financial statements, and those provide different levels of assurances in their accuracy.
Okay.
So a compilation is the lowest level, and in some states you don't even need to have a CPA license. And so you could basically have a bookkeeper, you can go to a technical school for however many months, become a certified bookkeeper or whatever. Or not even that. So it depends on the state. And you could just have Donald Trump right there talking to you while you work on their QuickBooks. And there are a couple standardized statements that go at the beginning of a report, and you don't even need to be independent most of the time. So that's not very sturdy ground to base it on. And, it's up to the banking institution what level of assurance they want.
And what are some other levels?
So the bankers, when they issue out a loan and they say what type of report they want, they know full well the subjectivity or objectivity of the report. So the next level of assurance is called a review report. You have to be a CPA, and it just states that you're not aware of material misstatements, and they generally go by accepted accounting principles. And then the gold bar standard is the audited financial statements. And if you are going to go public on Wall Street or something, you're going to have an audit. And whereas a compilation report, it may take you as little as an hour to do a compilation report.
And that would be with like a third-party vendor, like a big accounting firm.
I mean, a lot of people go to, for a compilation, you don't even need to be an accounting firm. But for audited financial statements, absolutely. And that process can take from weeks to months. And so if you have inventory, they're going to do samples of your inventory. If you have accounts receivable, which what business doesn't, hopefully, they're going to talk to people who owe you money and make sure that is the case, and look at any supporting documents related to that. If you have loans, they're going to look at the loan statements and, if the interest rate makes sense or not, and if payments have been, made. They're going to look at your tax returns. They're going to look at just about every type
of the microscope
asset and transaction that you have.
Okay.
And make sure it's up to snuff. And so that's the gold standard. So if Donald Trump had audited financial statements, then okay. But yeah, the compilation report is not worth a whole lot. And then some podcasters have pointed out that he walked into court with a document in his pocket of his jacket called a disclaimer clause. And, a lot of things come with disclaimer clauses, and you don't hear about people getting sued. And it's basically Donald Trump saying, hey, banker giving me this loan, you should go with your own discretion, basically.
Do your own due diligence. Right?
Yes, exactly. So, and the judge didn't go with this, which, again, I say he's a little biased.
Well, is this, predetermined? He's he even said, Mr. Trump and A.G. Jones also,
they refuse to address him as former President Trump.
President Trump or former president. It's always Mr.
I'm sure they call their teachers by their first names as well.
Right. But anyway, the as far as having this preordained, he's already said, look, Mr. Trump, I've already found you guilty of fraud. Now we just need to figure out, the rest and how deep does it go. And, all I can see is, with Trump kind of lashing out and being asked questions. Obviously, there's not cameras in the court. There's not an audio. We'd have to wait to see what the transcript actually is when the court reporter publishes it. Mm-hmm. But apparently, the prosecution asked President Trump open-ended questions. And if you ask an open-ended question, you get an open-ended answer. If you ask a yes or no question, you get a yes or no answer. Yeah. And
what do you expect, Judge?
Yeah, exactly. And we all know that President Trump's a talker. And so the answer was in there somewhere, but obviously he did talk about how this trial is unfair and this, that, and the other. And the judge kept admonishing Trump and talking to Trump's counsel, saying, "Hey, look, you need to control your client." And the attorney said, "Well, the prosecution's asking open-ended questions, and so Trump gets to have an answer, and you should be interested in hearing what he has to say." And this, as a quote, "This really bothers me." The judge saying, "I really don't want to hear what your client has to say." That's literally the
The
whole
whole
point
reason why you're there.
of a bench trial is the judge needs to hear all of these things. And the only thing, if I was an attorney, which I'm not, I would have immediately moved for a mistrial. And I would have said, the judge, you have literally just not done your job. Your job is to listen to what the witness has to say and then balance that against the case that the prosecution brought. Not say, I really don't want to hear what your client has to say. That is a fail. That is a fail on the judge's part. And if I was Trump's attorney, I would have immediately objected and said, I'm requesting a mistrial because obviously this is judicial incompetence. But as far as I know, he did hit the table and he yelled at Trump's attorneys to sit down. So I don't know what kind of kangaroo court. We don't have a gag order on us. So I don't really know what kangaroo court this guy has and his clerk. But this is just setting him up for an appeal.
Lack of professionalism, which I tried to warn you about before you got in the military. Like, civilians are way less professional than you'll expect them to be. Exhibit A. Yeah,
I mean, but there's an expectation of decorum, right? And
yes.
and I got it. Trump is a little bombastic, but still to say I don't want to hear what your client has to say. His job as a judge is to find the truth in the words that Trump is speaking, and so that's what his job is. I mean that's what his job is, and so all I can see is appeal. And the advantage of the appeal is that typically if there's fines assessed or there's jail time assessed or anything like that, you get to stay out or not pay your fine while the appeals process is going on, which is hugely to Trump's advantage. In fact, he is
$250 million. It's a lot of money for anyone.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but still, for all of his court cases, I mean, he's asking for continuances. The secret document trial. The federal government had 3 years to come up with their case, and so he's like, I need 3 years.
That's another question I've had. What is the statute of limitations on this? Because this compilation report was 2014, so he's making these statements in 2014. I wonder what the statute of limitations is. That's 9 years ago.
Yeah, maybe we'll do some research and we'll put it in the comments, or maybe you guys can tell us what the statute of limitations for those of you that are listening in New York. Leave it in the comments and we'll be more than happy to take a look at it. But it is kind of interesting because New York really wanted to go after Trump, and they passed that law that eliminated statutes of limitations for sexual assault cases for a period of only 1 year. And who was the one person that got
roped into
that was Trump, and he was found guilty of
you changed the law for one person?
One person for 1 year.
That does not sound American. That sounds like third world regime to me.
Yeah. I mean, we have to get Donald Trump. We're going to change the law 1 year, free for all, and then it goes away. And so, the appeal process is going to take a long time, and what's going to happen is all this is going to be pushed back until after the election. And I again, every time he gets indicted, it's another 5 points. So
when will they learn?
And all of these are going, even if he's found guilty, all of these are going to be appealed, and he's not going to be in jail. A lot of people say, he'll serve his first year as president if he wins re-election in jail. No, he won't. First of all, they're not going to continue to prosecute him while he's a sitting president. But second of all, the appeals process, you're out of jail during the appeal unless you're a violent person and a flight risk and all that kind of stuff. But he has police with him, federal law enforcement officers.
He's the most recognizable person on
24/7.
Earth.
Yeah.
So he's not going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere. And plus, if he went somewhere, he wouldn't be president, and so he'll miss the general election. But still, I think the judge has obviously shown his bias. There's no way that this is not going to get appealed, and I would think that I'm not a legal attorney, and I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, not sponsored. But I just feel in my gut that this is just an appeal waiting to happen.
Yeah. So whether you love him, hate him, want him to go to jail, pay his fine, or don't want him to, our verdict is this is a biased trial.
Yep, I agree. Openly biased. So that concludes this segment of Azimuth Podcast. Please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I'm your host, Barrett McNabb, joined by my beautiful wife, Kimberly McNabb, and we have another Oliver Anthony song for you. This song, VCR Kid, has just absolutely been campaigned in our comments section. So thank you to everybody who has been commenting for us to review this song. It's an awesome song. We love it, and we have a list of songs that you guys are requesting. And so we really very much appreciate your support. Please make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button. We're a small YouTube channel, and every single subscriber makes a world of difference. But we want to make sure that we're reactive.
Yep.
And listen to our podcast family. And so we have VCR Kid pulled up. It's an older song, and it doesn't have a video attached to it. It has a photograph of his dogs, still pictures.
Now, for all of you youngins out there, a VCR is like this narrow black Scotch tape looking thing, and it goes on these two spools like this big, and it's in this very hard plastic thing, and then you put it in this relatively gigantic chunky thing that's 4 times thicker than a laptop, and it plays movies. So that's what a VCR Kid is.
I want to say it was the evolution of the 8mm film, the spools of film that you'd put on and put in a film projector and turn on. I think this was the next step up for that.
He's 31, so he's just old enough to know what a VCR is.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's listen to this song, and it's deep, just like all of his other songs.
My grand, I had fatty. There's a dusty box of old VCR tapes, and there's a kid that looks kinda like I did before I made all my mistakes. For those dark nights, hard fights that he won't win, for those heartbreaks, mistakes that'll haunt him till the end.
I mean, it's classic Oliver Anthony. The deep lyrics, and I can really empathize with him because so the reason I say 8mm film is my father, I'm a little older than you, and my father had an 8mm camera and would take childhood movies of myself and playing and things like that in the 70s, and I got a chance to see those, and it's amazing to see the blank slate of what and who you are about to become, because back then everything is frogs and honeysuckle and big wheels, and you don't
birthday parties at Showbiz, not Chuck E. Cheese, Showbiz.
Showbiz Pizza, and you haven't experienced life yet, and you can go back and see the clean slate, and you can see the fights that he knows that are coming. I mean, he knows what has happened. That young kid on the VCR tape doesn't know what's coming yet, and how hard life is going to be. It's just. I've gone back and I've looked at that, and our son, with the iPhone, you can, take photographs and movies at your leisure at an unlimited rate. And our son is 6, and I saw yesterday a film that I had filmed, and he's telling a story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and he's in pre-K 3, so this is 3 years ago, and I can't imagine just how much he's changed. He still had chubby little cheeks and things like that, and our son is a beanpole. He's very skinny, but he had chubby little cheeks as a 3-year-old, and it was just amazing to see. So
he's all head.
Yeah, all head. So what do you see out of these lyrics?
Well, on the still picture, gotta have the dogs.
Yep.
Right. Got the dogs. Check. So it's kind of interesting that the VCR tapes are in his granddad's attic and not his parents' attic.
Yeah, okay.
Because, our home movies on VHS tapes, are in my mom's home. Anyway, it's kind of implies like a kid kind of looks like I did. It's like, oh, yeah, that really is me. Like, was I really that little? Was I really that innocent? And all the home movies that I remember are of my brother and me at a lot of them at Kate and Scarlett's ages, or now maybe just a little younger. So, yeah, anytime our daughter wants random picture, video on her phones, I'm just like, this used to be such a big deal for us. It had to be a birthday, or I'm from Georgia. Like the one time in 6 years it snows, which Barrett clearly got that in Columbus, Georgia, in Fort Benning. But it had to be a big deal.
And
Anyway.
Also to remember, when I was a kid, in order to you took a photograph,
you had to go to the drugstore.
You had to go to the drugstore and wait a week, and you were going to see the photographs.
The person snoops through all your stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, what are they thinking I'm doing in that picture? So then it goes on, and it's like, before I made all mistakes, the dark nights, like, I know what's coming. I know it's coming. It's like that scary part in the movie, you know what's coming. And same with the heartaches, like, oh, I didn't know what was coming for me.
Right. But so far, absolutely amazing song.
If you just keep on climbing, keep on fighting, till you reach that mountain ridge, I bet you $1 when you look down in that holler, you'll be smiling like that damn VCR kid.
Yeah, when he's looking down in the holler, obviously that's a valley or a
it means like a valley full of pain or something,
right,
like,
or a draw,
like what he just went through. And one thing that struck me is his voice went up to like, okay, I'm gonna be like, I'm climbing up this mountain. I mean, that's exactly what his voice sounded like. So he's climbing up this mountain of pain and suffering that he's gone through his life. And now he's like, now I can look down on it and be happy. And he's in the smile.
And know that you survived.
You know you survived.
This beautiful world that we're living in, I'd give all I had just to get it again. About all the pain, about all the things I've done. And the lines on my face are starting to tell stories of the past that I know so well. The things that I'm ashamed of, that I've done along the way.
I mean, the power of the lyrics. I mean, the thing that I most appreciate about his music is that it's not bubblegum pop.
Yeah.
Right?
Meaningless.
Meaningless. It has deep meaning, and it has deep meaning to him. But the thing that makes him a beautiful storyteller is that it relates to all of us.
Yes.
We can all relate to this. And, it's very deep. I mean, sometimes we get comments that we overanalyze things, but the reason that I think Oliver Anthony deserves to be overanalyzed is because he is so masterful and so deep. You need to. If you just go on the surface, you're not going to understand the story that he's telling of his life. And that's really kind of what is just amazing with his music, and the fact that we can all relate to it.
Yeah. So he talks about the pain, and then getting over the mountain ridge, and he mentions beautiful world we're living in. So it's kind of like going down, back up. He's looking down on his life, and oh, look at this beautiful world. But then he goes back into, the pain and stuff again. So his song is kind of like that.
It's a mountain ridge. It's up
Yep.
and down.
C'est la vie.
It's up and down.
All of those hard nights, long fights that he won't win, those heartaches, mistakes, and I haunt you till the end. If you just keep on climbing, keep on fighting, till you reach that mountain ridge, I bet you $1 when you look down in that holler, you'll be smiling like that damn VCR kid. When my granddad's attic, there's a dusty box of golden VCR tapes.
I mean, what would you tell your young self? I mean, this is an opportunity in his mind. He gets to look back at his young self and say, you're not going to win all of the fights that you have coming up in your life, but
Keep pushing.
keep fighting. Even though he knows he knows that in the past he's not going to win all the fights, he's still challenging his younger self to keep on pushing. And
you'll smile again in the end.
yeah, and that's why he's so successful now. And I don't mean with YouTube views and concerts and things like that.
He pushed through addiction. I think he just had a kid.
He just
so
a new baby.
Congratulations to him.
A new baby, so I believe that's 3, and he has his wife and he has his family and his dogs, and he has more. And the more is what is important. And the more is what he has fought through. And the more is what's going to carry him through into the future. His faith in God, his family, his friends. And the success that he has is not because of views. The success that he has is because of his self-determination to be successful and to use his creative talent to get him out of the hole that he's in. Yep. And climb up to the top of the mountain. This was a very moving song. We have a lot of these.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Thank you so much for the recommendation. We have others that have been recommended to us. We're going to make sure that we get them. We just want to make sure that we also do them justice as well. And this has been just an absolute amazing, movement that we have been on with this podcast. And again, we've only been doing this for 90 days, and we're getting better. I think we're a little less awkward in front of the camera. And we just hope that you continue on with us on this journey. And again, I cannot wait. I'm so excited. We're now less than a month away to get to December with the 2 new songs that he's going to be coming out with. And I know you guys are eagerly awaiting that as well. So thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.